Thank you for being here. We have Dr. Matt Wilkinson, who some of you may recognize if you're watching it. He has been here numerous times to talk about all sorts of things with us. And now we also have my friend, Dr. Brandon Youngblood from California. And so we've got a sociology professor in Matt and a psychology professor in Brandon. I will let them kind of give a quick intro, what their interests in specific, like field of study is, what they're doing research on perhaps, and then we will start talking about conspiracy theories and cults, everyone's favorite topic.
Well, y'all, I'm easy, so I'll go first. Y'all hopefully know me because I feel like I'm doing this once a month, usually the same topic as well. And that means that there's so much in this topic that we're always just barely scratching the surface, and it's not conspiracies and cults and that sort of, hive mind is not going away. In fact, it's getting worse. So I think we can keep talking about it. But my name is Matt Wilkinson. I'm an associate professor of sociology at Coastal Carolina University. The views expressed here are my own and not that of my employer, of course. My research is in violence and aggression. And I've recently started looking into obviously cults and conspiracies. So that's me.
Yes, and he has a fun little passion for jujitsu. So that actually, I'll plug the survey that you were doing. Is there an end date on that? Or
no, it's going for the next month or so, yeah. Okay,
cool. So if you participate in jujitsu or any sort of MMA, I think.
Yeah, any sort of martial art, yeah.
Yeah, take his survey. Go ahead, Brandon.
Hi, yeah, I'm quite flattered you introduced me as Dr. Youngblood, but I do only have my master's, so yeah.
Sure.
And no problem. I am a adjunct instructor of psychology, social psychology out here in California, Delta College, Sacramento City College, Folsom Lake College, and I live the adjunct life, so I don't have the real research focus at my campuses. My background is on the study of gender, the psychological study of gender, as well as violence. So I think Matt and I have a lot to kind of go back and forth with there. And so also just general political psychology over the past handful of years, getting more involved in the political process. I've been much more interested in seeing how the mind, the body, and society really interact. And we can't do that without having political conversations. And so I really try to bring that into my classroom. I don't necessarily talk specifically about campaigns or certain politicians or anything like that, but my main focus is trying to get students to see through different lenses on how everything that happens systemically and socially has a very direct impact on the mind and body. We can't separate these things. So when it comes to cults, when it comes to conspiracies, when it comes to disinformation, these are all very psychological questions too.
Awesome. Well, listen, if you ever decide to get your PhD, we will come back and celebrate you.
Thank you.
As someone I talk to, lots of academic people here, especially at Coastal, but I also criticize the institution as well, as someone who dropped out of college. So there is no elitism in this conversation. But this is the first time that we've had a psychology expert on with us. It's usually philosophy and a bunch of sociology professors that we talk to. Matt's whole field has been on like multiple times.
Sure. Well, hopefully I always tell my class, I feel like I teach more from a sociological perspective anyway, even though social psychology is my focus. So I'm pretty sure we'll have a lot of agreement over that.
Same here.
Awesome. That is exciting. Super, super exciting. So the first thing we're going to do before we get into the, heavy stuff that may not be so much fun is I'm going to name a popular conspiracy and call on one of these two gentlemen to tell me if they believe it or not. You could say like a full-hearted yes or no, or you could say like maybe like 75% yes, but it has to be like, don't think about it. Just come out and say as soon as you can what your thought is. So okay. I will go ahead and we will start with the fact that birds aren't real to some people. Matt, what do you think? Are birds?
I can't remember what one of my students brought that up one time, and the entire class was, just was amazed that I didn't know about this. And it's like, what do they say? They change the batteries at night, and you never, you never see dead birds or something. Like, well, I've seen dead birds. Like, those are just decoys to throw you off. And the birds are definitely real. But the fun part about that is you can defend that position. And that's what my students did one day. Is they were pretending, they like arguing with me. Like, well, you think that they're real, but those are just the really good synthetic ones to throw you off. The rest are robotic. So if you commit to that belief, let's go with it. Birds aren't real. You heard it.
Oh, I love it.
I'm gonna have to go on the side of team birds are real. I mean, they're pets. There's birds that wake me up out in my country home. So, I mean, they're definitely there. The government would have to be quite involved in this to make sure that was a fake or conspiratorial thing.
Yeah. That was actually one that I just learned about within the past couple of weeks. I
did
not know that there were people that thought that birds weren't real. So here's a very obviously popular and common one is that Princess Diana's death was not an accident.
Oh, that's a good one that I don't have a lot of information on. So, my instinct is to just accept what I've been told, that it was an accident, because that's the information that I have leans that way, but I don't know of any of the other evidence or information. So that's actually one I would wonder. What I know coming in is that it was paparazzi chasing her, I believe, and that seems to be Occam's razor, the most likely explanation. So I don't really know about anything behind that. So I still side with it. It was an accident. It just there's too much that would have to happen and that would have been uncovered since then. Too many people involved that it wouldn't have been leaked. So okay. That's a good one.
Brandon?
Yeah, that's kind of, honestly, that one's closer to the whole Epstein didn't kill himself kind of a thing. I mean, I don't have any deep insight into it, but it's just such a logical conclusion that a lot of people didn't like her, didn't like what she stood for, didn't like how she, maintained herself as royalty. She kind of had a criticism of the royalty in general. So, I mean, it's completely plausible that there were people that wanted to see her harmed. I don't know if that was the instance in which they executed that plan. I don't know if it's some grand plan, and I don't have any, I don't really care, to be completely honest. But yeah, that one is a little bit more on the plausible side, in my opinion.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I agree with that one. I feel like it is totally possible for me to be convinced that it was not an accident.
For sure.
Not in the realm of birds not being real.
Right.
Oh, okay. So another really, really common, popular one is about JFK, obviously, but there are multiple thoughts on it. So Lyndon B. Johnson orchestrated the hit.
I don't know about that part.
Yeah, I think it was a single gunman. We've had lots of information that's been released in the Warren report. And again, if there was some sort of conspiracy involving multiple people and agencies and all these people who are involved, yet no one has come forward to say that I was involved or I was involved in the cover up. That's and there's, I could go on, but yeah, that was single gunman.
Yeah, I'd say, again, I don't have a lot of passion in uncovering this particular one, but I've read some things about this one as well. What I find interesting is that we don't hear more about Red Scare angle, painting Oswald as like a communist, and therefore that's why they wanted to take out JFK, or because apparently he was very involved in leftist politics. So I'm surprised that that's not much more common in the thread of why he wanted to kill him, because that would be logical. If the state, or the deep state, or whatever you want to call it, was involved in that, then they would probably try to hype up that narrative, which I find curious that they don't tend to do that. That's not deeply associated there. So I don't have any great insight, but I'm always curious to get more information on Oswald in general.
Yeah. So there was a documentary. I don't have the book that I wanted to show, but there was a documentary that just came out. It is probably within the past couple months, called JFK Revisited. And I just watched it the other night. Well, when I say the other night, I mean like 2 or 3 weeks ago. So I watched it 2 or 3 weeks ago with my husband, and I am always like easily swayed on this one, that like it's possible that there is more to the story. And a friend of mine, Mal Hyman, he actually, he's a sociology professor. He also only has a master's. He tried to get his PhD, and his thesis was going to be the media's role in the JFK assassination. And he is in his 70s, so no one wanted to like touch that at the time. So he didn't get his doctorate, but he put out a book on it, and it is called Burying the Lead. I have not been able to finish it because it's very dense, but it's very informative. And the guy who was the author that sparked this documentary by Oliver Stone, the newest one, Jim DiEugenio, he actually endorsed Mal's book. So it seems like there's a little bit more reading that I should probably do on the subject. Yeah. But it's crazy that all these years later, we can still be talking about JFK and his murder.
I'll have to check that out.
Yeah, it was really good. It was really well done. Lots of new information and things that could have came out that have still been, they're still sealed. So who knows when we'll get all of the pieces. Right. But let's see. So there's another one I heard recently that mountains are hollowed out and there are things inside of them. I don't know all the details on this one, but do you think that mountains are hollowed out and that there are secrets being?
I mean, have y'all ever seen the inside of a mountain?
No.
So then it's possible, right? You're just going to believe what the mainstream media is telling you about mountains?
Oh, yeah.
Well, I'm confident there are some mountains that have been hollowed out, and there's probably some secret dark layers in a mountain somewhere. But is this a staple of mountains? I don't think so.
I mean, Batman's cave has to be
exactly.
There you go. Yeah.
Exactly.
Oh my goodness. Okay, let's see. Bigfoot, real or fake?
Hide and seek champion. I love that meme. Hide and seek champion. That I like that when monsters out there, just because you haven't seen them doesn't mean they're not real. But again, if something exists, it seems that there would have been some sort of evidence, real evidence, not the evidence we keep seeing that ends up being revealed as a hoax. By now there would have been something. So I'm going to say not real. I hope.
Yeah.
Just because I want it to be true doesn't mean it's true.
With this one, it's interesting. It's like, I don't think Bigfoot as it's like in movies is real, but this is a pretty common cross-cultural narrative about, this monster-like big, person or thing that kind of either haunts or is like in the background of some lore, folklore. So is there something to be said to it? Who knows? I don't have any insight into it. But when it comes to evidence, this is something that psychology brings an interesting perspective. You've heard the phrase "facts don't care about your feelings." Ben Shapiro, Mr. Popularizer. The opposite is literally true. Feelings don't care about facts because we live in a post-fact world. Facts are honestly not very helpful when we have people that will literally believe anything. So the fact that we could have this kind of lore around something like a Bigfoot and no evidence has come to light to prove it or disprove it, etc., is kind of a tenuous suggestion because people will simply believe what is a dominant belief within a particular culture at a given time. So it's really hard to kind of tease out how to use fact-based evidence for some stuff. Bigfoot, who cares? There's no stakes here really. But this is why it's really hard to get people on the same page, to not come behind, important progressive change to make the world better, because we see evidence through our emotional lenses, which can be really problematic.
Yeah. Do you have anything you would like to add to that, Matt, at all?
No, I mean, it comes down also to you can't prove that Bigfoot does not exist. It's a non-falsifiable position. So my position saying Bigfoot doesn't exist, what evidence do I have for that? Like, well, it's the whole absence of evidence thing. I can't prove the negative that it doesn't exist. So you're saying it could happen. Like, I mean, Bigfoot could be the one manufacturing the birds inside the hollow mountain, where Lee Harvey Oswald.
They're all connected.
I mean, like that. If you really want to go there, we can combine all of them together and say, can you prove that's not what's happening? No.
Yeah.
Okay, then that's the predominant. That's the narrative we're going with. So.
Yeah. That is a great point. Now, okay, so my last silly question here is obviously going to be the best one. Is Tom Hanks drinking the blood of children?
Oh boy. No. That was a tough one.
Yeah.
I guess is this an inside joke? This goes back to previous questions, I'm guessing.
No, I mean, that was one of the looped into the QAnon and the satanic, rituals with children. And, just to not go all the way into it right now, but the fact that someone in Hollywood who's as known and as connected as Tom Hanks could be into anything like that and not have someone who would have evidence, cell phone, text messages, just for that to actually happen, Tom Hanks would have to be the most powerful person who's ever lived. It's so incredibly ignorant to think that could be what's happening, but people believe it.
Yeah, it's not even so. Tom Hanks is like one of a few that they believe drink the blood of children for their I don't even know what it's called, adrenochrome or something.
Adrenochrome, yeah.
Young, really that's Botox and plastic surgery. It is not blood or a hormone in kids' blood, but like just Tom Hanks to me seems like the most ridiculous person to pick. Like he is Mr. Rogers. That is Tom Hanks. He is
nicest guy in Hollywood.
Gump, like no, just not him.
And the drinking the blood of children, I forgot what book I was reading that went over this. It's a recurring theme for conspiracy theories and New World Order that goes back decades and decades. And there's one in the 80s, and it's always different politicians, but it's this fear. And if we're uneasy, how do we make them into monsters? They're essentially vampires. They're drinking the blood of children because that kind of gives us something to hate and be scared of, as opposed to they have too much power and I don't like them. Okay, that's fine. But no, they are evil. Get on my team. We're standing against evil. It just really, kind of hyperbolic, makes it an easier target to attack.
Yeah, it's called a satanic panic. It goes from decade to decade of hyping up this, somebody who stands in political opposition to a particular candidate or a group of people. They very easily have propaganda machines that can paint somebody as their, deep evil opposition. And that's supposed to not just elicit disagreement, but to simply state that this is like a global existential evil that must be dealt with, and see the other people as deeply inhuman in order that they could agree with or support these types of practices and rituals. And so ultimately, I'm guessing we're going to get to this eventually, but these types of satanic panics, sadly and very frustratingly, often go back to Jewish conspiracies as well.
Yep.
It always comes down to drinking the blood of children. Why? Who's drinking the blood of children? Well, the Jews are drinking the blood of children to control the world. And so there's this conspiracy chart that went popularized on TikTok about a year ago. I don't know if you've seen it, but it goes from the grounded in reality to, leaving reality to science denial to the anti-Semitic point of no return. And there's a lot of these different layers and levels that are interconnected with each other that I find this chart pretty fascinating.
Yeah. I know what you're talking about. Let me see if I can pull that up.
I have it up. I can put it in here.
Okay.
Yeah, I can picture that. You brought up, I think, the point that it's a political opposition too, right? Is who are we attacking with it? Because you see this with the with QAnon and the Epstein, like who's responsible or who hangs out with him. There's all these pictures of Clinton, but there's 10 times as many of Maxwell and Epstein with Trump, and people see that and they go, well, no, I don't count. Like, if you think that this person was in charge and leading a child sex ring and there were other people looped in, and you're saying the Clintons were involved and Bill Gates was involved and they were on the flight logs, and then here's all of these images of Trump with them. Here's the pilot saying, I flew Trump, but not to the island. But then people go, no, not him. He's safe because he's not their political target. That shows that it's not about any sort of truth. it's about using that narrative to attack their political enemies, which are the Clintons, Tom Hanks, for some reason, Wayfair, Bill Gates. Who else am I missing here?
Wow.
Probably Biden somehow, just because that's who they want in their crosshairs, and then people believe that.
Yeah.
Well, that really shows their hand too. So here's this evidence. Nope. What was the one that came out in the trial that one of the victims said that she was introduced to Donald Trump by Epstein when she was 14? That's on record, and everyone just went, okay, that has nothing to do with anything. What? How is that not the end of it? You know?
Yeah, I mean, well, his followers are literally thinking that he's going to bring down this international elite global pedophilia, devil worshiping ring of the Illuminati. Like, what?
Yeah. And that would have been the rationalization is, oh, he was undercover trying
for that
to,
many years.
That's how you would have, pulled it into the narrative is that, well, yeah, he was undercover. He was trying to get close to him. And so he could bring down the pedophile ring, and he's still going to. But instead, no. He was just friends with them because they were businessmen. Go ahead, Brandon. Sorry, I cut you off.
Well, I was just going to say that, I mean, I totally agree with you, is that liberals do this too, though, right? They see Clinton on the list and they do the same mental gymnastics. Right. I mean, there really is an extreme solidarity with the rich and powerful elite. It really is, doesn't matter if it's Democrat, Republican, there absolutely is a rich, powerful elite that I'm not sure, well, I'm confident they're not getting together and drinking the blood of children, but there is a significant power structure there that brings about justifiable anger. But these types of conspiracies are used to honestly lessen our ability to hold the rich and powerful accountable for actual tangible crimes and corruption, because it diminishes our ability to point out the very real problems. And when it comes to like QAnon and like the Wayfair stuff and the sex trafficking stuff, as you know, Matt, we go through these seminars and these workshops talking about how to spot red flags in students that might be involved somehow in being groomed or being set up for trafficking. And what is just incredibly heartbreaking, especially where I am in the Central Valley of California, it's one of the biggest hubs of sex trafficking in the country, up and down the valley here. And so these are very real problems that, because of ridiculous suggestions like QAnon and bringing in the satanic panic, it makes it nearly impossible to engage in any mainstream educated way about the very real harms and dangers of sex trafficking that young girls and boys are engaged in. And that's the real travesty there.
Right.
And that's why, and this is going to sound perhaps conspiratorial of me stating this, but I'm pretty confident in this, that whoever promotes things like QAnon are very much part of the group of people that have their hands in these types of sex trafficking engagements, because it makes it sound so ridiculous. It's just like this cover so they can continue to muddy the waters of what's true and what's possible. And it really hurts a lot of people. And I've had papers from students, I'm sure you have as well, that either know people or have been involved themselves and have luckily escaped it. And so these are very real problems that is very frustrating to see this type of bullshit. Excuse me, can I cuss? I'm sorry.
Yeah.
And I was going to say it's the smoke screen, and you hit the nail on the head, is that it dilutes our ability to effectively deal with things like human trafficking, and sex trafficking of children, which is a very real problem here in Myrtle Beach as well. But when the attention and the outrage is for, they're shipping them in Wayfair containers to Tom Hanks, who lives inside a mountain. Like, come on, you were so close to understanding that this is an issue, and now all of the rage is directed here. You shift it and say, well, it's really a local issue, and it's predominantly children of color. Then suddenly there's not as much, petitioning and protest. Suddenly the reality of it is not what they want. It doesn't get them as angry.
That's such a great point. The fact of the matter is, like, the only time it really ever seems to make national news is when it's some pretty white girl that is the face of a particular incident. Like, what's her name? Gabby Moreno? Is that right?
Petito or Petito? I don't know.
Petito, something like that.
Yes.
You know who I'm talking about. It was a couple months back, right? And so this was like all over.
And then it turned up murdered. Yeah.
But like the fact of the matter is, disproportionately, we're absolutely talking about women of color who are abducted and sold into sex trafficking, and we sadly do not hear enough about that, and it's just a tragedy. It's wrong.
Yeah, Ashlyn and I were.
I'm sorry. I think we're gonna maybe say the same thing. Matt kind of did a little, I don't know, like personal, not official, obviously, research study, but it was like his personal, just kind of like a little side thing he was doing with our local area. It was it 2 summers ago? They all were up in arms, Save the Children. Like it was the whole county. It was like all kinds of people were outraged. Meanwhile, they never were before. It is absolutely because of politics and the media. And now 2 summers later, like where are they? So what you kind of see when you were low key looking at these people and what they were talking about?
Yeah, it was right before Facebook and other social media platforms started blocking or deplatforming some of these groups. And there were several groups that were Save the Children, popped up around, would have been August, maybe July or August of 2020. So very much a distraction going into the election to mobilize some angry, mostly white people about this is about the fight to save our children. And I had been invited to the group and ignored it. And I think there was some sort of post that just triggered that, like, hold on, someone on the internet is wrong. And so I joined the group and then started commenting and kind of lurking and observing. And, but, being my true self, I wasn't posing as someone else. So there wasn't like an ethical issue. But the one that kind of started to divide people is I've started posting some actual stats on sex trafficking and sexual victimization from the data sources that we use in sociology and criminology, and some of them were showing disproportionately affecting girls of color, the poor, homeless, LGBTQ youth, and you could just see some of the tone shift. We're like, well, we don't really need data, and these are again mostly white people, mostly white women marching with T-shirts with a white girl's face with a tear, Save the Children. And like locally, that is not who's being, yes, some of the victims do look like that, but overwhelmingly, no, that's not what we're seeing. So eventually the group got shut down, but they were not a QAnon group. They didn't know they were. It was maybe there were 10,000 people in this group. Maybe 1,000 of them were like card carrying, flag flying QAnoners. The others like, no, I just want to save the children. And that's how dangerous it is that people that I know were pulled into and said, this is not QAnon, this is about child trafficking. Don't you care about that? And so that's how they recruit people, but it's not based on facts. It's like you said earlier, it's based on emotion. The feelings pull people in and it mobilizes them and then it gets them to vote a certain way. And then, October, November, there was no more push locally to get this group going. Once it was the inconvenience of it getting banned on Facebook, everyone just turned and focused on something else. It was never real concern, which is really enraging.
Because we actually have like what you were saying, you go through with, seminars for your college, for your students. We have local kind of like meetings to learn like what the signs are, or like red flags to know. And I had gone through it whenever I was volunteering at the Rape Crisis Center here. So like you could get involved locally and actually like learn a thing or two about what is really happening. It's not all like Taken and Liam Neeson and all of that good stuff. But like Matt said, everyone kind of just disappeared. And that's the problem with these things is people who care get brought into this, and then slowly they're seeing all this propaganda, maybe about other things, and then it's just a slow radicalization to the right. And then how many people maybe became anti-vaxxers who were in that group who had all their shots before COVID? Like, that's something that I think about all the time.
They started using the masks, made it easier for the child traffickers to grab your child. And I'm going, what is that based on? Like, also we want to attack masks and COVID protocols right now. So that's what's risking, the lives of our children is mask wearing,
Yes, and that's where the political angle comes in. Oh God, we should talk about that, right?
So, critical race theory is endangering our children. Like whatever they're angry about, then they form a conspiracy theory around it. Anyway.
Exactly, and they never actually know. They never actually know what any of these buzzwords are. That's honestly, and this is going to sound very elitist of me, but it's very easy to be a conservative propagandist. To be a leftist propagandist, you have to deal in some material condition that affects, it's more complex and nuanced. But to be a conservative propagandist, to get people involved, it's very one note, but that note works incredibly well. I mean, just some statistics that a lot of these people probably don't know. There's anywhere from 20 to 100,000 trafficked children in the country per year. Like the numbers are very, very large. And it's not some cabal of Satanists that are behind this. They are often abused children in the foster care system by abusive partners of single parents. These are very common tropes and what is observed in a lot of these populations. And so the fact that we are trying to focus on democratic Satanists and all these terms that are thrown around by these people in these save the children type movements, again, just comes back to really muddying the waters and nothing ever gets done. I mean, I don't mean to go full nihilist here, but we'd actually would have to have some sort of institutional power that cared about actually improving people's lives to get something significant done. And that just doesn't exist in this country. And that's a whole other conversation, I suppose, that there's really no system of power that has any interest of doing things to improve the material conditions. But this is the most shallow way to go about it. And they're not even trying. They're just trying to mud the waters.
So I think this one is easy. Like this conspiracy seems to be an easier one for people to fall for. But say like, if we want to talk about maybe things that have actually happened in the past, cult leaders like David Koresh or, Charles Manson, what do you think makes someone like a good target? How do people fall into these conspiracy theories led by cult leaders, that they're like the Lamb of God or, anything, whatever they're spewing, especially with David Koresh. I am always like baffled when I learn more about him and that whole, I don't even know what you'd want to call it, like the whole commune of everyone living together. And I can't comprehend it. So maybe we can hear from both of you, but Brandon, like the psychology behind someone who becomes a cult leader and then like the people who follow a cult leader.
Well, the people who are cult leaders, in not every case, I'm going to suppose that there's personality disorders involved in these people, either narcissistic, antisocial personality. So there may well be a biological component there that is, we look to biology way too much to explain why things happen. It's actually in rare cases that people have a broken brain or a brain chemistry that's fundamentally, different than the average population. That's oftentimes used way too frequently. But in some cases, and like some of these people, that might be the case. There might be actual psychopaths involved in this. And so, but when it comes to those who fall for these things, it's very important to look at the three prongs of why people kind of get involved in cults or conspiracies. It's to explain random or unimaginable events because they are just outside of their ability to perceive the Occam's razor, the straightforward answer. And people want to have a perceived control over their life and their surroundings. So when something is so unimaginable, they're going to latch on to something or someone telling them that they can make it easy and understandable for them and to take away the confusion and the anxiety of not knowing. Also, to feel special. People want to feel special. They want to feel as if they have a positive self-image and they have elevated status as part of a group that's privy to secret information. And so we have a very individualistic and a society focused on status that if anything can give us a sense that we are one up on somebody else, that we're better than, superior in some way, because that's the social structure. We don't preach equal opportunity and collaboration. We preach hyper competitiveness. So anything psychological or material that can separate us from others is going to drive us into that lane. And third, the sense of social belonging. One of the most fundamental needs we have as human beings is the fundamental need to belong. And if you are in a group of people like QAnon that are all passionate about this particular cause, even though it's nonsense and dangerous, just knowing that you are in this deep community of people believing and thinking similar things, that's literally dopamine, serotonin constantly rushing through your brain and body. It's reinforcing this behavior, and it's making you feel like a drug, like you're high on information, which happens in a lot of settings, but particularly so in conspiratorial settings.
That's awesome. I love it. See, I've been telling you we need a psychologist, Ashlyn, for so long. She's frozen. Yeah, the what I've said in the past is talking about locus of control and feeling like you've lost control, which creates a sense of panic and anxiety. And so to have an internalized locus of control, I can control my environment, or I have power. You find the group, there's that sense of belonging, the community. And, sociologically, that's what makes it so hard for people to exit out, or to raise their hand in their happy hour group and say, well, I got the vaccine last week, because they're scared that people go, oh, you're a traitor to our movement, or Barack Obama wasn't that bad of a president. Or for liberals, Donald Trump did a few things that were good. Instead, we keep our mouths shut because I don't want to be kicked out of the tribe, because that's where I go to for my sense of belonging. So, it becomes kind of a groupthink, diffusion of responsibility. You're sitting at the table, and maybe most people at the table don't really believe what's being said, but they don't want to be the one to raise their hand and say, I think we should take this seriously, because then they lose their status and their protection in the tribe.
And the status, absolutely, 100% agree with all of that. And what is powerful on a psychological level when it comes to status is that your status is constantly in a state of flux. We don't have institutions or systems that allow us to feel a consistent amount of status. It's a constant competition with each other. So this is why social media causes such a backlash to our minds and even our bodies, is because if you post something, you don't get enough likes that you would like within the first however much time, you're literally going over and over in your mind, wondering about, oh, is my status getting hit? Should I delete this? Did I say something stupid, etc.? And so same thing goes for these group meetings, this hyper tribalism. It's like, could you stand up because you have something to say that might be contradictory to your tribe or your in-group, and risk being ostracized by that group that you need to survive, that we all need the sense of belonging from other people? And this is why we don't get anything accomplished, is because our society is so hyper divided in two large sections of a political process, but it's also micro segregated within those groups as well. So we're all so, ripped apart. There's no cohesiveness whatsoever. And so from a sociological perspective, we really need some of that cohesive fear that could bring us together. And we had something like COVID, we have something like climate change. Yeah. And unfortunately, not to be nihilistic, but we literally just went through a generational pandemic. We're still going through it. And it brought us further apart. And so I'm not sure if y'all have seen Don't Look Up, but I'm pretty sure.
I'm watching it this week. Yeah.
It's not satire. I'm sorry to say that it's a documentary, because COVID is a perfect example of how, I'm sorry, but we're doomed. We're not going to make it on this trajectory. It's very sad.
We talked about last time how, or maybe it was 2 times ago, I don't know, how the moment that Fauci disagreed with Trump, that's where it got really bad for our entire country, because all of the tribe who were following, and some of them worshiping their leader, then saw Fauci as the enemy. So whatever he said after that was, we're going to do the opposite, total oppositional movement. And what's fascinating now is that within the last few days, Trump was on Candace Owens' talk show and said that the people who are dying aren't the ones who are vaccinated. The vaccine is amazing. I got the vaccine going. It's saving lives. It's a miracle. And so now you wonder what, cognitive dissonance, these people are like, well, wait a minute. I mean, imagine if he had said that all the way through, if he'd worn a mask, if he had said from the very beginning, it's patriotic to wear a mask, but because we need to retreat and disagree, here's reality version A, the other side says B, and then it creates this elongated pandemic. So frustrating to see.
That was a really fascinating interview, because
unbelievable.
I was like, oh my God, this is like a based clip of Trump. Like, he's saying the right things on so many levels. Like, what is going on? And so, but what I also saw, because the tribalism and the status and the in-group and the propaganda is so profound, that Trump perpetuated lies about all this, there was a lot of people that I saw just kind of anecdotally on social media that said they are now done with Trump because
Yeah.
he has been co-opted, which it just goes to show there's no logic or consistency with any of this. It's all completely aesthetic. It's all completely exterior. There's no grappling with any sort of fact-based reality. And then it's like coming back to it, psychologically speaking, this is a huge problem and why we're never going to make any progress.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's funny. My mom, we don't speak. She is a former Democrat turned Trump supporter. And so in South Carolina, we don't register by political party, but in Pennsylvania, it's closed. So you do register by party. So she actually, she stopped voting Democrat, I think after Bill Clinton. And then she actually didn't change her party affiliation until Trump ran in the primary, and she wanted to go out and vote for him in the primary. And she, the last time I talked to her a couple months ago, she still supports him, but it's just really, it's funny because, she is fully vaccinated. She had me fully vaccinated. And the only reason she got the COVID vaccine is so she could see my kids. And it's just interesting to see the kind of mental gymnastics that they do to make things make sense to them. It's just when did you stop believing your doctor and now you just believe your I don't even know, your leader who's not even he's not a leader anymore. Do you guys think that Donald Trump knew he'd turn into this I don't even know, messiah to them?
Well, he has the charisma that Brandon was talking about of leaders. And to be fair, we do see hero worship on the right and the left, and we do see rejection of science on the right and the left, but it is blown up recently with COVID and with climate change. And I just, when you start to, like you said, when you start to ignore your doctor or the local doctors or what the local hospitals are putting out, all 4 or 3 of our local hospital systems were saying, please wear masks and get vaccinated. People LOLing at it, oh, you're part of it. You are now ignoring physicians and medical researchers because they've been co-opted by big pharma and the giant conspiracy coming from the left. And to the extent, I don't know if you all saw this, but it was a graphical representation of percent vote at the county level for Trump to Biden. And I might be able to pull it up and throw it in the chat. I guess you'd have to share it.
I can screen
and
share.
the number of deaths for COVID. So in the beginning, it was massively tilted in the blue districts because it hit New York. But then as the vaccines came out, now to the point that it's something like 10 to 12 times more likely for someone to die of COVID in the counties that were 80% Trump as opposed to 80% Biden. And whoever posted this, political scientist said, I can't remember the exact language, but it was the largest or the greatest disparity for any sort of health outcome by group they have ever seen. So whether it's black, white, man, woman, for political party, for how you voted, there's a disparity with COVID deaths. So they are literally killing themselves and each other by committing to this narrative. It's incredible.
And it's when these type of statistics come out that you tend to see somebody on the right make a public appearance and talk about how, all right, now let's get vaccinated, let's do this, because they're getting the memos from their internal, talking points. It's our base is literally dying. So can we halt the propaganda for a second and actually get them to stay alive until the next election? Because look at how disparate these numbers are. But one thing I wanted to say when it comes to the left and right and anti-science and whatnot, it unfortunately does exist. I have to look at students' criticisms or concerns with big pharma and provide a nuance that a lot of people don't tend to have. Is it true that big pharma is a problem, that it's greedy? Do they push pills? Do they push this and that for profit? Yes, of course. But it doesn't invalidate the science that is behind a lot of these breakthroughs. Modern medicine is a good thing. It's a beautiful thing. Vaccines have saved lives. Is there a profit motive that needs to be abolished? Absolutely. But we have to have a nuanced angle here. We can't say that psychopharmacology is fundamentally wrong and evil and hurting our brains at a biological level, when certain people with depression, anxiety, or even antipsychotics can really benefit by having some of these medications. Are there problems? Are there side effects? Are there symptoms that don't always mesh right with people? Absolutely. That's why we need an overhaul of the healthcare system to give more time and attention to get these things right, to have more holistic approaches to treatment. So that's the antidepressants. Anti-science is what I see a lot on the left, and kind of like the more holistic everything, which dips its toe in like anti-vaccine stuff as well. But that's a really frustrating one that I have to deal with a lot, that we have to do both, get rid of the profit motive and the rapaciousness of these companies, while also saying that, wow, modern medicine and these breakthroughs are a fundamentally good thing.
That's something that I talked about, I don't even know, months ago. I just did like a short little rant on Instagram about how like you can be critical of big pharma and you can be, you know, a leftist, a socialist, a liberal, a progressive, whatever you want to call yourself, and you know, be against big pharma and be against a for-profit healthcare system and still like support and value science. Like, does anyone realistically think that all of these, you know, epidemiologists and infectious disease researchers are in on some big conspiracy, that they're, you know, all of these vaccines are just trying to like poison us and like make us infertile? Like that, no one is in on, it just is impossible. There are so many scientists in the world. How would you ever get them all to just shut up and not talk about something like this?
Right.
Yeah, it's like all these medical students, they go into hundreds of $1,000s worth of debt, go to school for a decade just so they can fool John in some rural community to make him think that he's getting suckered by the big pharmaceutical companies. Like, I mean, it's really mind-blowing.
Yeah.
I think we talked about this last time too. Imagine recreating, you know, a different type of conspiracy theory, which says that this is me being like facetious here. This virus was designed and deployed within the United States so that it would kill Republicans at 10 times the rate of Democrats. The data would show that is what is happening in the counties that are heavily, and people would lose their minds. Like, how did this happen? Like, they convinced people through slick propaganda to not trust Biden, who's an actor, and Fauci, who's just a mastermind. They knew that if they used certain language, that they could convince people not to get the vaccine. Think about that. That's crazy, right? Oh, there it is. Cool.
Yep. So if you want to explain it, I have it pulled up. Let's see. Is it? It's on Facebook. Okay, so it is showing up on Facebook. Let me get this one down, and I'll move this over. Maybe.
Yeah. So what you're looking at is the dark blue is counties where the Democrat vote was 80%, and then the dark red is 80% for Trump. So you can see on the far left, I wish I had a cursor, this is driving me crazy. This is the date is, you know, around April of 2020, when we were seeing the spikes in New York, right? So that 2.5 deaths per 100,000, massive spike in blue areas. As we started to get a feel for what's happening in the pandemic, so July and August, you see the blue lines drop. Then there's this drop in, let's see, was that so May of 2021, right where the cursor is? Yeah, we're all pretty similar, right? Because I assume that, you know, some of the waves have passed, we're kind of getting on with our lives, but then there's this explosion with, I'm assuming, Delta and some of the other variants. And so at the very bottom, the lowest, the smallest line are counties. This is not a few people. This is looking at county vote across the United States compared with the rate of death per COVID in those counties. So the lowest death rate is in the areas that had the heaviest Democrat vote. That should not be our reality. We should not be taking medical advice based on our political orientation. So, you know, it's like 10 times the amount. Death rate
is ridiculous. Look at that.
Right.
And it's
only getting worse.
All red and then all blue and just a big old gap.
And so present this to someone who doesn't know anything, and they'll say someone unleashed a biological weapon that was designed to target people in certain areas. That would be their explanation, because, you know, how did they do it? Well, they either just released it or they created propaganda to get people to not trust the doctors and the researchers and the physicians and the nurses, and to just avoid all medical expertise and just treat it with Horse
Well,
tea warmer. I mean,
this is
The
really
local Tractor Supply has the ivermectin behind a glass case. I don't know if they always.
and of course, it's not actually horse dewormer that people use.
Literally
It's an
just
antiviral.
well. This is actually
right, but people were literally going out and getting it.
Yeah.
Well, I know you were.
Go ahead, Brandon.
I know you're creating a bit of a bit talking about creating this intentionally for rural or red communities, but this isn't too far from a strain of the conspiracy in which they talk about how it's a Chinese virus intentionally released in order to cause a global problem, and so that is kind of in line with what some people think. So.
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I know there's still even a lot of debate, even in leftist circles, about the origin of the virus, and there's a lot of conspiracies out there and everything. I'm in the camp that it's not confirmed. We do not know. I think the best evidence suggests that it is a wet market accident in the areas around Wuhan, but there's also been some evidence to suggest that certain strains of COVID was observed in Europe prior to the major outbreak that took place in Wuhan. And so, I don't know. So I'm always very suspicious of people who say they know definitively how some of these things happen. That's actually a really big tell for somebody who, they're trying to speak through a scientific lens and somebody who's just trying to speak emotionally through propaganda. Most of us are probably pretty tempered most of the time, stating that, so the best evidence suggests rather than we know for sure that this is what's happening, right? Mm-hmm. And so that's what I try to tell my students. You always want to say, that scientists are never 100% anything, you know what I mean? Even though there's 99%, you always have to say, this is how science evolves. And you have people that get upset when there's new findings. It's see, we told you this is bullshit from the beginning. It's like, no, that's literally just the scientific method. You keep trying, you keep observing, and you change and adapt based on new information. That's the whole point. But our minds are not in a current place in this cultural zeitgeist, in this political zeitgeist, that we're allowed to make adaptations to our perceptions, to what we believe. Because our knowledge base is so deeply tied to our perception of ourself and our self-concept that anytime we are even brought to the attention of information that might contradict what we believe, especially if we believe strongly, we're going to immediately become defensive and reject it, because that's not just giving us new information to adapt and update. It's literally saying you're a bad person to the defensive part of the mind. And we are in this very sensitive, hypersensitive time where our status and our competition with each other is really taking a deep toll on all of us. Mm-hmm. That's not to say that we have to coddle the fragile feelings of certain people, but it's certainly to recognize the defensiveness that is going to come up in a lot of conversations. This is one area where that unfortunately happens a lot.
Yeah, and that's exactly what it is we can't admit we're wrong in general. As a social scientist or as any sort of scientist, you're wrong all the time. And so when new information comes along, well, I guess we should be drinking 4 cups of coffee a day, or now it's only 2. Damn it, I was living a lie last year. What's that?
Are you trying to make me feel better about myself?
Yeah. And so you think, well, last year they told me that I should only have 4 cups of coffee, and they were wrong. Well, then you just adjust and you make your decisions based on the best available evidence at the time. And that can change with new studies or, new breakthroughs, new strains of a virus. And I think people don't like that nothing is settled. And in science, nothing is settled. There's always, there's consensus. There's overwhelming scientific consensus. I guess we could call that settled, but there's still things change and they're still evolving. The evidence is evolving. But at that moment, you make the decision based on where's the preponderance of evidence. It's great when it's 95%. It's disconcerting when it's 52%. But you go to Vegas, what are you betting on? 52% or the 48%?
Right.
Or the 2% that says climate change is fake.
Oh, I'm so excited when you finally watch this Don't Look Up. Really, I might have to actually buy you coffee, because I may try and get you and Jamie McCauley to come on and talk about it after she's watched it. So it is that
oh, that'd be fun.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I'm not saying a word because I don't want to spoil it, but Brandon, I wish you
wow. I mean, I don't need to invite myself, but I would love to be there for that as well, because the conversation the conversation that's going on about this film right now is blowing my mind. And I can't say anything, if Matt hasn't seen it, but there's people are really working hard to not get it. Like it's one of my criticisms is that it's not subtle at all. It's like so over the top that it's kind of annoying at times. But like certain people are still like, this is what it means. I'm like, oh my God, no, that's not even close. But anyway, that's going to be a good conversation to have.
I need to move that up my list.
Yes, yeah, you do. It's really good, really good. Like I know some people have their things with Leo and he dates like lots of young women or 19-year-olds. I don't know, but he does a very good job in this film, and he's a fantastic actor. He does a really good job. Like this is probably I think that the effort that he put into this role is like Jordan Belfort effort from Wolf of Wall Street. Like he definitely gave it all of his attention for sure. I wanted to bring up something. So do you this conspiracy chart, I want to try and bring this up so people watching can see it. And it has been updated for anti-maskers and anti-vaxxers. I saw this, I think, originally. I don't know if that was on there originally when I saw it. Let me share the screen again.
I haven't seen that update.
Let's see.
Yeah, I followed the author. She's pretty great.
Okay, let's see.
You go to theconspiracychart.com, or I believe. Let me.
Yeah, that's great. Oh, cool.
So, yeah, we've got things that actually happened. Bohemian Club, which there's a really funny Alex Jones quote on a Joe Rogan episode from a couple years ago about the Bohemian Grove, which I do not believe his theories on it, but it's honestly it's hysterical. And let's see, Epstein didn't kill himself, so we have questions. The JFK assassination, which we talked about, Princess Diana, free Britney. Why is that there?
Well, because for a while this could be removed. Oh no, it should be in the green. The one I'm looking at on the website, Free Britney, is in green now.
Yeah, things that actually happened. Yeah.
Okay.
Because for a while there was this whole conversation about, oh my God, I think Britney's like, I think her dad is like mistreating her, and that's like not a conspiracy. She was legitimately being, abused psychologically by her father. So that's in the green now.
Okay, so this one, ignore everybody. It is moved down. We all know this because she finally has her freedom. Here's the Loch Ness Monster. I can't read this, and I'm like,
I've got it in front of. I have the updated one in front of me, which is good.
Okay.
Yeah, it's conspiracychart.com.
All right, let me pull that up instead.
We live in a simulation. That's one of my favorites. There's no way to prove it. Prove it one way or the other.
Sometimes the Matrix movie hits really close to home.
Yeah.
Okay, so.
Oh, Avril Lavigne replaced. I love that one.
Operation Paperclip, Watergate. Yes. Big oil pushed climate disinfo. Yes, we know this. Okay, so leaving reality. Epstein didn't kill himself. Jimmy Hoffa disappearance. We live in a simulation. What's that Jim Carrey movie? Didn't they already talk about this?
Truman Show.
Yes. Yeah. Oh man, if we live in a simulation, whoever is in charge of me has to be very bored.
The Sims.
Assassination. Yeah. Okay, so we've got unequivocally false, but mostly harmless. Greta Thunberg is a time traveler.
That's a great one.
Ted Cruz is the Zodiac killer. The Titanic never sank.
Yeah.
All right. What does this say? Let me move it over. Dangerous to yourself and others. The anti-Semitic point of no return. Essential oils cure all illnesses. Feral people in forests. Biden is a robot.
Yeah, that's the reality denial block there. Pandemic, vaccines have microchips.
Jet fuel doesn't melt steel beams. Okay, that's 9/11. Vaccines have microchips. Okay, no, they don't. My arms are not magnetic.
Essential oils cure all illnesses. That's a good one.
Mm-hmm. The microchip is my phone, not the vaccine.
I'm pretty pissed about the whole 5G not being in the vaccine, not gonna lie, because I live in rural part of Stockton out here. We have really poor internet, and I was really hoping for a boost, and I just didn't get it. And so Bill Gates lied to me, and I'm really upset with that.
Oh, Antifa did January 6th. All right, so got detached from reality, and world ruled by supreme shadow elite promotes hatred and violence towards marginalized groups. Secret satanic rituals. They did recently say that concert, the rap concert where people were unfortunately trampled and died, they said that was a satanic ritual. That was a part of a satanic ritual. Let's see. Flat Earth, the Great Replacement, trans agenda, Nazis on the moon. Can we click this?
I have not seen the George Floyd as a crisis actor, but that also gets back to something that has come up, the cognitive dissonance. And if what, pretending I'm a different person, if what I saw on the video is true, then we have a problem with policing. We have a problem with racism in our society. That makes me uncomfortable. Therefore, he had to have been a crisis actor. A lot of people arrive at these because it allows them a safe, easy explanation so that they don't have to address an uncomfortable truth. And, I remember watching that video after trying not to watch it for several hours, and it just the way you feel. Now imagine someone who doesn't want to acknowledge that can happen, that never happens, that these Black Lives Matter protests are over nothing. Then they see this, they go, that cannot be real, because if that is real, my reality is shattered. So instead, it's paid crisis actor. My reality is intact. I feel good. I never have to talk about it again. Where are we going to get drinks? Allows you to just move on with your life.
Well, everyone is a crisis actor to, Sandy Hook, fake. They said that those parents were crisis actors. Those kids didn't exist. What did they say? They said that the kids from Texas, or no, not Texas, sorry, Florida, the kids from Florida, that they were crisis actors, and that David Hogg, they said crazy, terrible things about him.
There was a real time analysis of Reddit when the Las Vegas shooting several years ago, when before they knew who the shooter was, that it was, I can't remember all the people. They thought it was Al Qaeda, it was ISIS, it was immigrants who came across the border, it was a terrorist cell. And then as soon as they started releasing the name and face, and you could see this hour by hour change, this is a false flag. This didn't happen. All the evidence first was this is evidence that we need to be tough on these types of criminals and blah, blah, blah. But then suddenly they realized it was an old angry white dude, crisis actor. This wasn't real. It's a false flag. The government's trying to grab control. Just in real time, they had to, address the dissonance, just massage it away.
Let's talk about that for a second, because let's be honest, of all the major tragedies that have taken place in this country over the past handful of years, that what happened in Vegas came and went incredibly quickly with no answers whatsoever. So let's talk about the conspiracy that's going on there. Who the hell was that guy? What were his motives? Why did that not get talked about? One of the largest massacre, right? In terms of body count. And we don't know shit about it.
Yeah. And because I used to study mass shootings and school shootings, and that one, none of it made sense. And so that's a perfect place for conspiracy theories to come in. Is how do we make it make sense? But it was just so bizarre and so disturbing that sort of violence could happen just like this by one person. So
I think that is where some of the past, past tense conspiracy theories come into play, with Lee Harvey Oswald. He's a patsy, they set him up. He didn't do it. He took the fall. So clearly, we know that JFK was murdered, and we know that Lee Harvey Oswald sent a letter to the FBI office. There was a lot of different things that kind of happened leading up to that with this man in Vegas. The most I think I know is that his girlfriend said that she like had no idea that he was gonna do something like this. So, but what would be the theory there? What kind of fall is he taking for this? What was the point?
Yeah.
I feel like
I really don't know. I don't have any details or answers on when it comes to the Vegas shooting.
Yeah, at one point I did, because I was reading everything that came out, and I remember the first kind of explanation was there's no way that he got all those weapons up in the hotel without anyone seeing, and they started releasing, I think the FBI or CIA, whoever, started releasing did we lose Brandon? There he is. Releasing the video security cam to show him taking multiple trips up with bags to the hotel room over several days. Like that's what he did, because no one's really paying attention. Of course, he didn't take it all up at once, but so that got explained away, is that no, he took that arsenal up through the elevator bag by bag.
I think it is also with that, there wasn't anything, I mean, other than the political conversation about gun control and gun laws, like there wasn't anything that they had to maybe, say this happened and this didn't happen. There's not something that people on either side of a belief could point to and be like, no, like this is what I believe and this is why, and that's not true. Like Brandon, you said, we don't really know much about this man. So maybe that could be part of why there don't seem to be a lot of conversations regarding what happened in Vegas and conspiracy.
There's no manifesto. There was no this is why I did it. Just leaves people, which again opens it up to conspiracy theories. Like we have no explanation.
But what I find interesting about that is that I don't even know of any conspiracies. I don't know of any why people aren't spinning the web on this this issue it's ripe and fertile for them. But I don't know of any.
Maybe because there wasn't a hint, there wasn't a thread to start pulling. So everyone was kind of like, which thread can I pull? I'm going to pass on this one because it's weird. Versus he was a registered Democrat, but switched his party affiliation to Republican. Oh, it's a Democrat trying to pretend to be a Republican, or vice versa.
Right. Okay. I didn't know.
No, he didn't. No, he didn't. I'm making that up. Yeah, I'm making
it
up.
Okay.
Saying if they found something like that, we would have had a ton of conspiracy theories. Or, if he'd donated a bunch of money to Bernie Sanders, that would have come out, and then that would have been the thing. But there just wasn't anything on him that allowed us to pull a thread and start going for it. It's fascinating, though, right?
There's no agenda to push by anyone, so that there wasn't, I guess, a great movement to talk about it. Like, with COVID and the vaccine, people, their agenda is that they don't want to have their freedoms taken away. They don't want to wear a mask, and they don't believe that the vaccine is actually a vaccine. I have heard that one recently, that it's not actually a vaccine. So that's the agenda. There's an agenda to push, regardless of whether or not there is science to show that that is bullshit. So that is a very interesting one. Like no one, other than saying it's a false flag, the way that Sandy Hook was handled, the way that Florida was handled. I mean, even I was a child, but maybe one of you remember Columbine better. I know, Marilyn Manson got blamed, like Eminem got blamed.
Columbine actually changed the direction of my scholarship and research. I was in college, and I forgot what I was doing for my senior project or junior project. And I remember thinking, like, this is bizarre. And so my advisor at the time said, well, let's do some work on it. So I started reading about mass shootings and violence and Columbine, then of course, Virginia Tech and Jonesboro, Arkansas. And, I was able actually to meet some of the survivors from Jonesboro, which was a really truly incredible experience to sit and speak with people. But it didn't make sense to me as a human being, but also as a sociologist. And I became very interested in things like Columbine. How does this happen? Out of nowhere. That being said, we turn our attention to school shootings, and we don't look at shootings in the inner city and handguns, which is much more common. But once white kids start shooting up buildings with other white kids, suddenly we see it as a phenomenon that needs to be researched and talked about.
Mm-hmm.
Sure. Yeah. No, I'm curious, Matthew. Do you use Jackson Katz's work in your classes?
Yes, I have. Yep.
Yeah, he's very influential in my thought around aggression and violence. And
Yes.
studying men and male violence was certainly right on my most interesting topics when I was in undergrad and graduate school. So
I came across one of his TED Talks a few years ago, and I'd never heard of him, and I watched this TED Talk, and it just blew me away. It was so good.
Yeah, violence is a men's issue.
He's fantastic.
Yes, is that it? Okay.
Yeah.
Yep.
And
do you think there's an overlap with that, Brandon? What you're saying about like aggression and violence,
and overlap with what?
An overlap with maybe the tendency to have those leanings with people who are capable of either like manipulating someone else or manipulating a lot of people, like going back to like cult leaders. Do you think that they have a sort of something in common in that regard?
Well, I'm most of these cult leaders are men, and so that's of course a parallel there. But when it comes to violence in general, I think we have to really look at this through a male lens. I mean, the victims of violence are largely men as well at the hands of other men. So if you are a female victim or a male victim or any gender, men are the ones that are perpetuating the vast majority of this violence. So I'd have to think about how it might directly tie to like cult leaders. But I think you're going to want to always come back to the psychological analysis of status. But as Kat states, and when it comes to aggression and violence, these are things that are deeply rooted in the male experience. And even if you are a male who is not particularly hypermasculine, you don't say to yourself, I need to show my dominance and virility in order to feel like a real man. You damn well went through experiences where that option was presented to you, and you had to either make sense of it as bullshit or say, hey, you know what, maybe I do want to feel what it would feel like to be an alpha in this moment. And that would lead you to the positive appraisal of violence as a means to make yourself feel as if your gender and your status as a male in this society was worthwhile. And so this is what I have to grapple with a lot of young, most of the people who take my classes are not particularly hypermasculine. It's very rare that I get somebody that kind of responds to my presentation of hypermasculinity as an issue with trying to suggest that it's a good thing. Most people pretty much get it. But for the most part, I have to talk to these more timid, shy men who are also beaten down by this suggestion of hypermasculinity as a positive thing. Even though that's not their lived experience, there's still this rage, this masculine rage that is toxically building up in a lot of men, whether they're hypermasculine or not. And this is a perpetuation of a patriarchy that teaches men one way to be men, in using women as the antithesis of their male identity, and this whole complex cocktail that brings in aggression as a means to validate these confusions. So that's absolutely something that is talked about, but I think it, of course, can always be talked about more. And Katz really kind of leans heavily into that in his documentary called Tough Guys, Guise.
So good.
Yeah, it's a really good documentary.
It's, talking about the different kind of range and spectrum of masculinities in class. I also find that I get some kind of, athletic, hypermasculine dudes in my class.
Yeah.
You can see the hesitancy to talking about toxic masculinity or fragile masculinity. But once it's explained, they go, yeah, that's totally toxic. And I'm around that sometimes, and it's bullshit, And like, well, you're not supposed to ever get in a fight because that's toxic. Like, no, that's not what it says. It says that using violence as the first go-to, violence as a last resort, that's a separate conversation. And no one's saying that take that off the table necessarily, but they've been, sold a kind of misrepresentation of what it means. And they start to unpack it and go, well, yeah, that is harmful. And I can see how that's harmful,
Yeah, men can get really vulnerable if you're able to create a space with them to make them feel like this notion of aggression as a means for their validation isn't relevant or necessary, and that you have to go through this process of relearning in some men in a therapeutic setting. I'm not a clinician, but I've taken some classes on this, right? And I have a lot of colleagues that still do male specific therapy. And if you can break down that wall that helps men realize that emotions are not the antithesis of who they are supposed to be as men, that they can actually, thrive. And as I say that, it's kind of ironic because I struggle a lot with emotionality myself. I'm not an aggressive male, but emotions are kind of a foreign thing to me. And so it just kind of goes to show that all of this confusion around what it means to be men is something that's still very prominent in our culture. And that's not to say that we should coddle the fragile egos of men. In fact, quite the opposite. But this is a conversation that doesn't get enough attention. And it really does play a role in something like the incel movement. That if we're going to understand the violence and aggression that comes out of such a movement, we are really analyzing a deeper sense of maleness. And this is why that somebody like Jordan Peterson can rise to prominence by peddling a bunch of gunk about what it means to be men, essentially praising and upholding an age-old patriarchy, when it is in fact the patriarchal way of understanding manhood that is really crushing the souls of men in the system as well. Mm-hmm. And that all comes back to violence.
Yeah.
That's our next live stream, Ashlyn.
Oh, there we go.
That's so good. We did years ago. I remember I wasn't even able to be there, but you did a talk about what was it called? The Mask You Live In?
Mask You Live In, yeah, the Representation Project. Yeah. I wish they would update that. It's been a few years, but really good. It's really good film. I forget who's behind that.
I feel like that's, totally relevant. Not to say that like women can't be cult leaders, but I can't think of any.
Good question.
Well, the praise and adulation that comes with being a cult leader is also kind of part of the narrative of what men are told they're supposed to be in our society. So the lineup, it aligns in that sense. So it's not impossible to be, female and be a cult leader, but it would certainly be obscure and perhaps different to observe that.
Right. Yeah. I mean, because obviously there are women with narcissistic tendencies, narcissistic personality disorder. But yeah, thinking about the past kind of cult experiences that we've seen that have all been turned into a Netflix or Hulu documentary, they all seem to be men. So that is very interesting. Very interesting to me to think about.
They also tend to be white men because, the pathology of the white male is such a conundrum to so many people in high places that want to make films about. It's like, how could the image of benevolence turn into something that we need to crack open their minds and figure out how this could possibly go wrong?
How could this person possibly be so evil?
Yeah.
Right? It's just, man.
And when you think about like violence and aggression, even the cult leaders who pretend to be peaceful, are still putting their followers in harm's way. Thinking about all of the children who ended up dying, thanks to David Koresh and the ATF and whoever was it, the FBI or the CIA who went in there. The way that the situation was handled.
I watched that documentary and then the Netflix with actors recreation, but both of them were good. The documentary with actual footage and interviews was pretty harrowing because I was very, very young when all that happened, but to watch it and see,
I watched both of those too, and it's so weird to say that I think Taylor Kitsch did a fantastic job of playing correct, but it was on the nose. It was so, and it's just, it's mind-boggling. So, I mean, I guess you could make an argument for the fact that whether they're abusing or, physically harming their followers, they're putting them in, or they did put them in danger. Mm-hmm. So that would be a very interesting thing to look at, linking the violence and aggression tendencies to that. But I am wondering, I guess, do the people, so I know Brandon talked about this a little bit, like the people who tend to fall for conspiracy theories or tend to follow someone, follow a leader, follow a cult leader, what we talked about, like what they might look like. But I guess, how do you think they break out of it? How can someone break out of it? Or how can you help break someone out of it? If you have a friend or, a family member who is consumed with, whether it's QAnon or whether it's Scientology or whether, who knows.
I'm not answering this one because I've tried to answer it at least 4 different talks. So I'm happy.
Well, Brandon can
to
go
have a
first, and
psychologist.
maybe
Exactly. That's what I'm saying.
Yes.
Yeah. It's really actually a pretty easy answer. Yeah, you don't. Like, most of these people are too far gone.
That's what I said.
Yeah, they're TFG, and that, like, you're not going to get a positive spin on a lot of this from me. In fact, one of the lines that my students often tell me, they're like, "Oh, Mr. Youngblood, I find your class so interesting, but I leave so depressed every single day."
No.
And so
Yep.
I'm like,
Same.
yeah, I'm sorry to tell you, the world sucks. It is, and like, you have to embrace the suck. Like, my job as an educator is to try to hopefully explain why the world sucks and perhaps give you a little more academic and personal insight into what went wrong. But I do not claim to have answers to make it better. I mean, I could give you the academic answers here, which are, you have to be calm and patient. You have to find yourself on their tribe. You have to psychologically insert yourself into their team and try to present information to them in a way that doesn't activate their defenses.
Yes.
But this is so tedious because, I'm sorry, like, I have family members in this case. I don't even try. Every time this comes up, it ends up in a yelling match, and we just don't talk about it for another 1.5 years or don't see each other, et cetera. So I'm not an example of somebody who can do this. But what the literature says is that you have to try to make them see you as somebody on their team, to talk about facts that can be easily verified, slowly and calmly and empathetically point out where their line of thinking has gone wrong and where you can provide evidence to the contrary, but also realizing that facts don't win fights, because of the fact that if you present a fact to somebody, people think I'm more well-researched, I have the evidence on my side, I'm going to present it all, and I'm going to win this argument, they're going to change their mind, we're all going to be friends and change the world together. But the exact opposite thing happens, because our beliefs and our understanding of what is true is so fundamental to our psychology and our overall sense of well-being, that when you try to present somebody any information that contradicts what they believe, they take it again as this personal insult, as this slight to themselves, and they're instantly going to shut down. They don't want to hear anything you have to say. They will justify and rationalize what you're trying to say to them is wrong and funded by the evil people, or it doesn't even have to go to that level. It could simply just be that, well, that is a talking point that you're getting from somebody who is politically in disagreement with me outside of my tribe, and then it's futile. But if you're able to get them on your side, that you're not attacking them, you might have a chance at having a conversation that can be beneficial. But I don't think that's a likely scenario.
Yeah, I feel better about my answers every time y'all ask me as the almost psychologist. Yeah, you alluded to the backfire effect, which I knew was real after reading the research on it, and then really felt how real it was by running headfirst into people with, here's the data, here's the evidence. And in my personal life, I've pulled back from that because it gets people to entrench and get their flags up and their jerseys on and start defending their team and the sacred ground that they'll die fighting for. And the thing that I always try to say that is, cognitive dissonance makes people uncomfortable. So I recommend trying to find the dissonance. And if you have the energy and the headspace and time, which is a privilege, to just gently poke, that's all you can do. And so right now with the pandemic, having the former president of the United States say my vaccine works, it's great. That is very, very hard for them to flip and make sense of. So was Candace Owens in the wrong, or was she right when she said that Trump is an old man who doesn't understand the internet? If that's true, then he shouldn't run for office. Like that's a gift. And unfortunately, I think I said this again last time, right now, there are actual real consequences for believing in misinformation that we have not seen. I mean, maybe in my lifetime, but for quite a while, where it's going to hit home eventually. And I've had friends and family members who have eventually shifted their views because they've lost someone or they know someone who lost someone. I watched a friend, I can't anonymize it, so I won't tell that story, but someone who says, I'm going to get the vaccine because people are dying. And I know someone who died, it came out of nowhere, and they were healthy-ish, not all of us are perfectly healthy, in their early 40s. And that hits them, and it makes them take a step back and go, I can still vote for the same people. I can still fly the same flag, but I'm going to go ahead and listen to what my doctor told me a month ago. And this is the first time in my life I've seen that happen where, and unfortunately it sounds cold and detached, as you just have to sit back and wait for them to say, yeah, I came around, I'm wearing my mask because this happened. I'm going to see my grandmother, so I'm going to get my booster because I don't want to be the one who kills her. And you say, great, that makes sense. Now we can argue about politics, like.
Yeah. No, you're right. It's tough. It's very
yeah,
tough.
It's a bad time.
Mm-hmm.
And that's why I just think consistently, I'm not optimistic about this. When one other thing that's important to state that we didn't necessarily get into enough is that conditions become ripe to believe in disinformation or conspiratorial thinking when people are struggling in a lot of other ways.
Right.
If discomfort is high, latching onto something that can appease your pain is going to be something that is very alluring. So we live in the time of, the greatest income inequality in the history of the world. We have a failing capitalism. We have an economic system that is only serving a very small amount of people. And that is the cause. That is the driver of all of these things. And so this is not something that's going to get cured overnight, but if we can educate enough people to understand it, it is the material conditions that create a ripeness for all of this dysfunction. We can get more people hopefully on board to recognizing these material conditions can be improved through public policies and collective action. And through that effort, we can start to see the conditions that create discomfort, that make it more right for us to believe in disinformation and conspiracies. Once we alleviate those things, we stand a better chance. But this is a long-term path that needs to be tackled immediately. And unfortunately, the elite, the capitalists, those that have the power and influence and money are winning, and it's a blowout. It's not even close. We had a fighting chance with a guy like Bernie, and now we see that, unfortunately, and I hate to be nihilistic again, like all that passion and that cohesion that we saw there is all but gone. I mean, we have hopefully a lot of young people that took in a lot of great information. And I will tell you that my students, and I'm sure your students as well, maybe a different demographic in South Carolina, right? That young people are super sharp. The capitalists have turned woke into a negative thing, but I think woke is a great thing. I think woke is a great term. And we have a great woke intellectual powerhouse coming out of Gen Z. And if we could possibly harness that, we might stand a chance because they have a lot of the right answers and a lot of good things that have come out of a semi or at least a marginally leftist movement around somebody like Bernie. If we can harness that, we can create material change that can make the world a better place. But unfortunately, because we lost and we lost big and we continue to lose, the conditions are going to continually get worse and we're going to continually see disinformation win. And I'm not sure if there is a leader, a figurehead, or somebody that we might need to use as a harness in order to bring us back. I'm not sure what's going to come next in that evolution, because it sure as hell is not Biden. It's part of the problem. It's a big driver of the problem right now. And so that's another uncomfortable conversation when we have to talk about that we have no political party that's going to address these material conditions. We see this on full display every single day, that what is Biden that's done any different from what Trump did regarding COVID and the pandemic. We're moving right back into the same Trumpian policies. And so we're on our own. And that's like that's CDC policy. Fuck yeah, you're on your own.
Yeah. Get it down to the state level. Yeah.
Yeah. So.
And that leaves states like South Carolina to people like Henry McMaster. So I'm sorry, that frustrated the hell out of me. That's just not acceptable. Really isn't acceptable. And it's just what I tell people, some people who have problems with Fauci, based off of, maybe things he said, but then, like we already discussed, evidence piles up and then you learn new things about masks, for instance, is that I don't even give a flying fuck what Fauci says. I don't listen to him. I don't get my information from him. I have found multiple scientists and infectious disease researchers that I look to for, the latest studies, information on, the booster, all the vaccines, all of the different variants. I don't care what Fauci says. When you're politicizing a virus it is just, it's mind blowing to me. Because yes, he's obviously a very bright man who has lots of years of experience, but he doesn't have to be the only source you take.
Yeah.
Like go find different sources of information that are quality sources. One that I like a lot is Unbiased SciPod. It's a podcast, but they're on Instagram. And then also there is a really wonderful infectious disease researcher out of Atlanta. So she's at Emory. And her name is Laurel Bristow. And she was like my first follow during the pandemic. The first person that I saw breaking down all of the lingo that we don't understand. And kind of, she's not a public health person, but she was basically making all of that understandable to all of us. So I feel like trying to break through the walls of Fauci and the libs, they're just trying to get us to take this poison jab, it's super frustrating.
Can I just say that this is yet again a failure of the Democratic Party writ large and liberals writ large to try to lionize a single individual scientist as the voice. I'm in the same boat. Why do people give a shit about Fauci? I understand he was in a position that we should listen to what he has to say, but he's not some king. He's just a scientist.
And what pisses me off as a sociologist is if you're a Democrat or you're one of the president's handlers and his team, and that the other side is going to respond a certain way, why would you do that? Why would you have, what I mean? That you're creating chaos for our country and causing people to reject, here's a person we can disagree with. Look, he's so unlikable and he thinks he's a king. I'm going to do the opposite. You're literally prolonging the pandemic. There it is. You're prolonging the plandemic as it's planned by having this one guy that people disagree with, instead of here's our panel of experts from all across the country. Very different people, Republicans, Democrats, black, white. Here's our panel and here's their recommendations. Rotate who's speaking, not this one person. Yeah. It's so simple.
One person that it's already been decided that a whole group of people don't like him or trust him, which obviously doesn't have to be based in anything he actually said or did. It can just be based in the fact that he one time disagreed with Donald Trump, who hardly ever even let him speak, and now he's speaking, and
or just move him to the background. Move him to the background after that, knowing that he's the best person to speak to it, but maybe not to speak to the public, because once he became public enemy number one, put him in the copy room with a typewriter and let him hand his notes to people. Just get him out of the camera. Put someone else up there.
Right.
And it just makes me think that are Democrats honestly this bad at this whole political thing? Or are they honestly doing it? Are they just really ignorant of it? Or are they just doing it intentionally because they want to lose? Are they the Washington Generals to the Harlem Globetrotters? They are literally I don't think this is a conspiracy. I'm very convinced that is their role. Their role is to create these safe, digestible, but relatively significantly similar in terms of the capitalist outcome to the Republican Party. So when it comes to these science-based conversations, they say the right things a lot of times, but when their policies have to stand up to the public, they collapse so easily. So it doesn't even matter what they say because it doesn't come to fruition. And so they're just either so bad at it or they're absolutely part of this destabilization effort.
Yeah. So in conclusion, the Illuminati and their robot birds are going to win.
Yeah. The birds.
There's a couple empty mountains that we can all hide in.
Yeah.
Hopefully. I was going to reference Don't Look Up, but Matt hasn't seen it. So.
No, I might watch it tonight. Yeah.
We will come back and we will discuss that. Definitely. Oh man. I guess it is a little obviously disheartening for people who want to try and pull someone out of, the QAnon or the Trump cult or the science denial. conspiracy theory lane, like that little chart that we had up earlier. It's just, I agree that it seems to be impossible. Like I'd mentioned to you guys before, just to kind of shift into the end gear here. My mom did get vaccinated, but she's still saying things to my dad, who they're divorced. My mom's remarried. They occasionally, chat. And if my dad's watching this, hi, stop talking to my mom. She tries to check in on me, basically. But I mean, she's saying things like Bill Gates has planned this, whatever she gets off of Newsmax, like clearly, like you got vaccinated. How do you believe this stuff? Yeah. Because if you believe it, you took the vaccine. Like it just doesn't make any sense. And I think there are probably a lot of people who are too far gone. Yeah. Like Brandon said, too far gone.
But here's the thing with that. Like, as it is in the political arena on all topics, similarly things can be said here that yes, most people are too far gone, but there's a lot of people that don't have a side. Most people most people are not engaged. We are honestly the most propagandized society on earth. We are the most misinformed society of any major country. And there's so many people that could be brought into the fold of knowledge with accurate knowledge, but we also don't have the institution set up to do that. Like I said, we had a bit of that going on in some of the previous campaign seasons. We're engaging a lot of people, a lot of young people, but that's where the efforts should be, on the ground, talking to young people. And unfortunately, there are the majority of people who are we don't need to be going to QAnon rallies and exerting effort trying to get these people to see the world from a more appropriate lens. There's plenty of people that are just at home, sad and miserable because of the world in which we live, that could easily be engaged and give a sense of hope that we can come together as a people. And so that is much more worth our time.
Yeah, I agree.
But I guess it's hard if you're asking very specifically. My family member is falling into this dark cult, and so I would like to not lose my mother or my brother or whatnot. I understand, and it is a tough pill to swallow. But it really comes down to, I guess I've said it a couple of times, we'll reiterate it. If you have somebody very specifically in your life that has fallen down this rabbit hole, I think if you could honestly, this is probably a scenario that may be beneficial. Just sit down with them and have them say to them, tell me everything that you're thinking. Tell me everything. I'm not going to respond. I'm not going to have an emotional reaction. I'm not going to bring any information to refute you. I just want to hear you talk. Talk until you are tired of talking. Let me in on everything that you are, have you been reading, what you've been observing, who you've been listening to. Just inform me on everything that you have been processing, and then see where that goes from there. And if you can help them see inconsistencies in their own narrative, in their own line of thinking, and they have that aha moment, and they turn to you and they're like, well, once you get that confusion in their eyes, then you can insert and be like, here we go. Here's a jump off point. Let me tell you a little bit about what I have to say there. But another problem here is that makes it so you, the caring person that wants to bring your family member out of this, you have to be rock solid on your information as well. And that's a great, tedious assignment for you, that when that opportunity comes up, you know exactly how to present that information. That's really hard. And you're going to fail at that. And it's going to backfire a lot. But that's the best case scenario, I think.
I saw something a couple of weeks ago. I don't know where I read it, but it was about getting people off of the cult conspiracy and QAnon train. And it mentioned like the power of volunteering. And I can't remember where I read that, but the framework they used was that when you take someone, like, let's say it's a relative who's kind of too far gone, you don't want to engage them because then it gets into a battle. But if you give them meaning and a sense of purpose, right, altruism, helping, that's going to give, and again, we have a psychologist here, whatever a hormone or neurochemical, your dopamine, serotonin, always get dopamine and serotonin mixed up. It's going to give you that feel good flooding of the brain, right? Yeah. And so that then kind of makes the drug of the cult or of the conspiracy hit like a little bit differently. And so whether that's a local organization or church or Feed the Needy or something, like, it's still a cause and there's a group and a community. And so it's kind of deprogramming them by giving them a connection to other live human beings that they're helping. And I don't know, I wish I could remember where I read that, but I saw it probably open on one of my 50 tabs I have open in my Chrome. And I remember thinking, like, why am I just now hearing about this? Maybe because people like ourselves are researching this and they're thinking about it because it's such a threat to the very foundation of our society that we're taking it seriously, and people are trying, kind of troubleshooting it more than we ever have before. But anyway.
No, you're absolutely right. That's 100% right. It is trying to take their passion and commitment to a particular cause that happens to be dangerous and trying to put it into something else.
Yeah,
in fact,
redirect it.
Exactly. There's this one bit of research that is studying depressed people in different cultures. They did a study where they took a group in a more collectivist culture, I believe it was a European sample, and then they took a group of Americans, and they asked them to go do something to make themselves happy. And the European group much more did things with other people. They went out and they did something for others. They volunteered. They did something as a community, as a collective. The American sample went out and they did a me day. They haven't had a spa day. They did some
did a line of
retail
cocaine,
therapy.
shut off some fireworks, and slammed a beer.
Then exactly right. And the moral of the story was, when our psyche is more wrapped into other people and community, we feel better. That's where true happiness can really come from. But our entire culture tells us that what is best is what fuels us individually. And so this can be similar when it comes to this conspiratorial thinking. In fact, I know this is a book on depression, but it's called Lost Connections by Johann Hari. It's one of the most profound books that I could recommend, because it really talks about all of the conversation around, serotonin and dopamine and these biological malfunctions that take place in some cases. But the vast majority of the reason people are depressed and anxious is because we don't have connection with each other. We don't have community with each other. We don't have meaningful values. We don't have connection with the real world. And we are constantly in this loop, this society that preaches us the wrong way to understand what is meaningful. And so when it comes to conspiracies, we don't have this meaning in our lives, and conspiracies give us that, and it's dangerous for ourselves and for other people.
I'm ordering that book right now for my mental health.
Yeah, Lost Connections.
I think that's some good advice, though, and we didn't come out with an answer on how to pull people out, and maybe it won't work, but at least it's something that folks can try who have not already given up on whoever it might be that they know that is down some sort of rabbit hole of conspiracy theories. Seems like QAnon is kind of wrapped up in all of the current conspiracies. I can't think of anything else that people are dangerously interested in right now, other than those sometimes religious cults, but that is a whole nother topic. We would need
another live stream.
Until next
time. Sort of religion expert. Yes.
That's not me. I'm busy that night. I am not, although right across the hall from me, one of my colleagues does a course on religious cults and violence. So,
okay, text me their name. We will definitely talk.
Do it. I will not out them here. But.
Okay, perfect. Well, don't put them on the spot. But I guess that was a lot. And Brandon, we're definitely going to have you back. And we are absolutely going to talk about Don't Look Up as soon as Matt watches it.
Yes.
And awesome.
I got to check in with Jamie and make sure
we could do a little panel discussion. That'd be so much fun.
That would be it.
I'll be at my home office so I can have a bourbon or a glass of wine.
I earned my Crown Peach. Do you guys have any last remarks or thoughts or anything that you wanted to be asked and you weren't, or anything you want to leave with people?
I'll just say real quick, I like doing this. This gives me a little bit of a sense of connection to other people as well. The last couple of years have been kind of hard on instructors too. We set, at least for me as an adjunct, I set in my office alone. I have my wonderful wife that I engage with on a daily basis. But other than that, there's a lot of disconnection in our lives as well. So just having conversations like this, I know there's always options to do this, but to be invited and just to have conversations with other people, intellectuals as well, I really appreciate it. So I would love to do this more often.
Awesome. Great. Thank you. We will put you on.
Put you on the payroll, the coffee.
There we go.
It's one cup of coffee per speech. Yeah, big coffee. Yeah.
Yes. very big.
Yeah, I
Matt,
have no real parting thoughts. It was nice having a psychologist. It was nice meeting you, and
Yeah,
not in
you as
real
well.
life. This is in real life over Zoom. It was nice meeting
Yeah.
you live and streaming.
Absolutely.
It's just so we're all kind of thinking about the same things and discussing them from different angles, but there's such a cool overlap in the middle, and I do feel like it's a space for problem solving and maybe generating hope and maybe some optimism. So yeah, I appreciate it.
Yeah, my pleasure.
Awesome. Well, thank you guys so much. And thank you for tuning in, whoever is watching this. You can find both of these guys on Facebook. And I know that Brandon, he shares a lot. Matt.
Oh, me?
Yes, you share a lot. I always see your posts. I actually got worried when Facebook took you off my feed, but I think you were zucked for a minute there. So
for a bit, yeah.
Yes, and I was like, oh no, what happened? But that as well. So go ahead and find and follow them, and we'll bring them back soon. So thank you guys. Have a good night, everybody.
All right.
Thanks,
See you
Ashlyn.
later.
Take care.